Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
Hey everyone, happy hump day and welcome back to The Wilder Ride, a podcast that celebrates the films of Gene Wilder 1 minute at a time in Season 2. And we are diving into Blazing Saddles, one You're a Free Man, Mongo, minute at a time. I'm your host, I'm Alan Sanders.
I'm your co-host, Walt Murray.
Stop laughing at me.
Well, yeah, I was going to say I'm not laughing with you.
I know exactly where you're laughing. It's our pleasure to welcome a brand new guest to us in the midst of this diving down the rabbit trails of Blazing Saddles. We have an attorney in studios, Brad Stevens, attorney at law. Welcome.
I'm glad to be here, Alan. I appreciate you having me. It's a beautiful day outside to talk about Blazing Saddles, which is easily one of my favorite movies of all time and one of the funniest movies ever made.
All right, before we can go into this, and we do this with every one of our guests when it's their very first time joining us, tell us a little bit about your background with Blazing Saddles.
Well, I saw Blazing Saddles, I believe, for the first time when I was a teenager. I didn't quite get it then because I was a little bit naive, a little young to understand some of the humor, but I watched it a lot when I was in college, and actually it was played for us in a literature class at the University of Georgia, and we studied the movie from beginning to end and had to write an essay upon the movie. Basically about the cultural relevance of that movie back then and now, or at the time that I was in college, and it was very entertaining. And we watched it, and a lot of people in our class were, pseudo offended by the movie because of some of the language that's in it and some of the things that it shows. But me and some of the others are like, you must not understand humor. I mean, this is Mel Brooks. If you know Mel Brooks' background, there's nothing racist about this movie. Actually, it's making fun of it. It's poking fun at America and how people see the differences between each other and how people react and how, I hate to say it this way, how dumb people are as a whole.
No, Walt, does this sound like a familiar conversation we've had with guests?
Oh, well, we were just saying before we started, every guest we've had has said, you can't remake this movie today. However, it's the funniest movie ever, and they go into the whole thing about it's making fun of racism. So we keep scratching our heads going, how can this not be?
Well, I can say this. I agree with you in a way that it can't be made today. But, I mean, if they can make Django Unchained, then they can make this movie again. Because Django is pretty hardcore.
I think where I fall in on this is the people saying it could never be made today, as if it had never been made before. I don't know that I would ever want this movie, quote-unquote, remade. We've already got too much of that in Hollywood. It's just the idea that people keep saying, oh, you could never make a movie like this today. I think that is more reason than ever we need a movie like this today to get people to start thinking about more than just the surface level of words. Like they hear a word and they just shut down instead of realizing, oh, wait a minute, shouldn't we figure out the use of the word and how it's being said in context with everything else?
You could cast it. In my head, I was just thinking how I would cast it right now. I mean, Samuel L. Jackson would be a pretty obvious choice for Bart for me. Maybe the guy who's in the Green Book. I can't say his first name correctly.
Oh.
Mahershala. I'm terrible with his name.
I gotta look it up.
Or maybe him as the sheriff. Mongo, I don't know who I would put at this point. Waco Kid, maybe Jeff Bridges.
You know who I think could probably pull off, we didn't even talk about this, if we were going to remake it, who would play Sheriff Bart? I actually think Will Smith would be good.
Will Smith? Yeah, he is kind of. Yeah. He's a
because
smooth
he's
guy
suave,
like
he's likable, he's got a great smile. The story behind which for the folks who've been listening day in and day out to this podcast are like, oh, here's that story again. But for our guest, Mel Brooks wanted Richard Pryor to play Sheriff Bart, but Hollywood was like, we're already seeing that he doesn't show up all the time. He's starting to get a little crazier. He hadn't gotten really big into the drug thing to the point where later in his career, but they were already worried about that he wouldn't show up. And Mel Brooks was going to initially say, well, if you don't hire him to be Bart, I'm not directing this. And Richard Pryor talked him out of it, said, look, I still haven't gotten paid my writing credits yet. And if you quit, they're probably not going to pay me. And I want to get paid. I'll help you find somebody. And they went to the casting calls. And when Cleavine Little showed up, he said, there's your Sheriff Bart. He's articulate. He's handsome, but he's black. I could be made, people might think I'm Cuban. there's no way he's not a black sheriff.
No. Richard Pryor, I'll say this for Richard Pryor. My dad has almost all of his stand-up on vinyl from the 70s. My dad bought all of his albums. And, I mean, you think some of this humor that you're hearing now is new? It's not new. Richard Pryor was doing it 30 and 40 years ago. It's some of the most funny stuff. Now, it's not suitable for work.
I was going to say, the first couple of comedy albums I bought were Steve Martin albums, and I could get away with listening to those with my mom around. But when I bought a Richard Pryor album, I had to go buy headphones.
Yeah, go hide. Yeah, I know. It's some of the funny stuff I've ever heard in my life. But yeah, just watch the crowd that you're standing around when you're listening to it.
Yeah.
I have always been a fan of Richard Pryor's stand-up comedy. When I was younger, I didn't understand half of what I was listening to. I just heard a lot of foul language, which was just part of the delivery, the mechanism.
Yeah.
But then as you got a little bit older, hitting the college age, and started realizing how he's talking about life. He's talking about real people. He's talking about actual scenarios, putting a spin on it where we're laughing, but at the same time going, damn.
Yeah. Well, he grew up in a brothel. So, a little bit of hard times right there. I don't know. I don't know how I would have reacted if I grew up in a brothel.
Well, you were loved by everybody, maybe.
I guess so. Oh, my gosh.
By a whole
Who's
bunch
nursing
of
me
broken
today? All right. So you actually have a background in studying this, both seeing it younger and then studying it literally as in a class in college. Is this in your, it's hard to come up with lists of your top 10 or favorite comedies, but how would you sort of mentally rank this movie for you?
I'd have to put it. I love movies so much, and there's so many different genres that I enjoy. I can't put it in just a one category. But as far as comedies go, I'd almost have to put it in 70s comedies, 80s comedies. But for me, I would definitely say it's in the top 10 all time of comedies for me. I put it this way: if it's on TV and I know it's edited and everything, I would still watch it. And it's like one of those movies that if it's on, I'm going to watch it. I don't care what point it's at. On TV, I'm going to finish Blazing Saddles while it's on TV every single time.
Let me ask you this, because it also obviously our podcast focuses on the films of Gene Wilder, and Gene Wilder is prominent in the scenes that we're going to be doing today. What's your thought on Gene Wilder?
I always enjoyed Gene Wilder. I thought he was massively underrated in his lifetime. He's not mentioned as one of the greatest actors of all time by anyone ever much. But I think he was pigeonholed into comedy. I mean, he could have done anything that he wanted. This obviously is my favorite movie that he was ever in, although I did enjoy him as Willy Wonka. That's one of my favorite movies of all time. I thought he did a great job. He's extremely versatile. I know he could be serious if he wanted to be, but I prefer him in a funny role. But his delivery is always great. And he's got that, he's got a look that nobody else has. Yeah. I mean, you won't mistake somebody else for Gene Wilder. He's a one-of-a-kind type of actor, and I believe Hollywood misses people like that. For sure. But, I'm a big fan of Gene Wilder. And this movie, as I said, my favorite one he was ever in.
One of the things that we've talked about with Gene is that he has the greatest comic pause of any actor ever.
Yeah. And
I oddly, I was rewatching Young Frankenstein this week, even though we've spent 106 minutes on it, or, episodes on it last year. And going back and seeing his acting in that movie up against this movie, he has, obviously very different characters, but he is the master of knowing when something is funny and how to deliver that line. And I don't think that there is as smart, I mean, there probably is, and I'm really not being fair about that, but it's hard to find anybody who has that kind of comic awareness that he has, of understanding how to deliver the line perfectly. And allowing that time on screen to simmer for a second and then really hit the hammer. So in movies now, you just don't have that. It's a lot faster paced, more frenetic, and the comedy's not as good.
Comedy today is almost all abstract. You don't have the slapstick stuff like you used to. I mean, there's no Three Stooges type of humor anymore. It's all, what's the word? I guess abstract's the word I'm going to use, but the kind of acting that you have to do to pull off what Gene Wilder does. I mean, you have to have a certain panache. Mm-hmm. You have to have a certain, the delivery, like you said. And there's very few people in the world that can pull it off like he can. It's almost like I talk to people about stand-up comedy. We were talking about that once again. Like if somebody else told a story, like a Ron White story, and it wasn't Ron White telling it, it wouldn't be funny. It's just the way that he says it. Right. It makes it funny. That's his delivery.
And you totally buy that Ron White really did get arrested and they thought that his nickname was Potato Salad.
My the favorite delivery he ever did to me or did for me was I was watching one of his first stand-ups, and he was talking about getting pulled over for a DUI in Texas, and he says, and they were pulling over everybody driving down that particular sidewalk that night. And that's profiling.
That's profiling.
And with Ron, you're totally convinced. You're like, yeah.
See,
Yeah,
if somebody else said that, you'd be like, wait, what? Huh? Yeah, it's just the way he says things.
Well, I think before we go ahead and dive into the minute, the comment I'd put on that about Gene and about maybe that style of acting, so many of them we know came from a theater background, and they had that sense of being on stage and holding an audience. They didn't get the ability to say, oh, can I try that again? You just had to go, and you had to learn how to fill in those gaps in time if somebody dropped a line.
I honestly think that's why Cleavon Little probably is a better Sheriff Bart than really any other actor at the time would have been because of his theater background. And I think being able to have that instant chemistry with Gene Wilder because of that background probably helped this movie a lot.
I agree.
I agree, too. I enjoy, and he kind of disappeared off the face of the earth after this. He wasn't in. I know he was in a few things afterwards, but he never recreated the notoriety that he got from this.
And
movie.
Of course, died way too young.
No doubt.
Well, let's go ahead and set the stage for what's coming up today. We're going to continue. We're in the middle of the week here. We're on minute number 63, and we're going to start off. Remember when when Sheriff Bart came back yesterday? The Waco Kid said, "I got a letter here from Hedley Lamarr," and so he was reading the letter, and it starts off with, "It's legal." And we're going to end the minute with, listen, Mongo. Mongo's in this scene. So let's go ahead and figure out where to start off. Brad, I got to ask you a legal question first. Let's just deal with this minute. You're a lawyer. You deal with judges and the law, and you understand how, especially on the criminal side.
Yes.
If a person goes riding roughshod through town and taking away people's rights and trampling on people, punching horses, and gets arrested, can the Attorney General just write a letter and say, Sheriff, I need you to unarrest that person?
Well, it depends on what part of the country you're in. If the person was a cooperating witness for the Attorney General, yes, I'm sure they could get that cooperating witness out of your custody and back into their custody really quickly. Just an average everyday citizen, I highly doubt it would be just quite that easy.
But the way it's written is you're free to go. Not we're transferring you over here or we're going to put you in our care because we're going to keep you for some cases. It's you're free, as if all charges are now dropped.
Yeah, I mean, if you could, the Attorney General, I'm sure there is a way that he or she could exonerate you within hours, but I haven't seen that done yet. Normally, it requires the bond procedure, and then you're free to go, and then you appear in court. But if you, what's it called, a number 6 in the movie?
The number 6 dance.
A number 6, yeah. If you pull a number 6 and you're whomping and a whacking everybody in town, I don't think you're going to get let go. I'm sorry. So, but that's a great line too, by the way.
So basically, somebody who's done some thuggery of this kind, trampled on the rights of others, the Attorney General can't just say, please let him go.
Yeah, no, I highly doubt that would happen, especially in this day and time with social media and the way things work. It would be publicized to the point where no one would get reelected. So,
I mean, one of the things Walt and I were talking about beforehand with our notes was if he had gone through and had been tried, convicted, and is serving a sentence, the governor could have given him a pardon.
Yeah, you can be pardoned or have your sentence commuted.
But the Attorney General doesn't do that either. The Attorney General might weigh in on it. Like the governor might go to them and say, hey, can I get your advice on whether or not we should do this?
I mean, dropping charges against somebody is normally up to the arresting officer, or once it gets into court, the prosecutor themselves. They can elect to dismiss charges. The Attorney General, I mean, I said it's surely within their purview, but you wouldn't see them getting involved in a case in a tiny town like that. Not going to happen.
Especially not out in the Old West where it could take a couple of days to get a message back and forth.
And the majority of the time, I mean, if you do your history of the legal process in the Old West back then, it was very corrupt. Everybody was paid off. It was nothing was on the up and up. I mean, and the very few guys that were ended up getting killed in gunfights for the most part. So it really that's why it's called the Wild West.
So I think some would argue that nothing has changed.
Yeah, no, it's still the same. Yeah, it's still rocking and rolling. Yeah. So
well, the next thing that happens after he puts that letter down, goes, well, it's legal. He does this great sort of half walk, half stoop, and then mutters under his breath,
oh, them schnitzengrubers can wipe you out.
Now, I thought the schnitzengrubers weren't, I mean, we talked about this. There's sort of a double entendre there, don't you think?
I'm guessing so.
So,
I'm just going to take a shot.
So is he full or is he just wore out?
I think he's a bit worn out.
I think he's blow out. But yeah, it was I love that scene. Lily legs. Yeah. I know I probably missed that already, but yeah,
Yes.
I've seen it.
You did.
Seen it a few times, but yeah, it's true. It's true.
Oh, that's great.
And how many schnitzengruben did he say that he had had?
15 is my limit on schnitzengruben.
Oh yeah. But
Well, then how about a little please? I am not from Havana.
I don't even know what that would mean.
I
but
don't
that's
think
great.
that. I've looked at that line over and over again, and I cannot figure out what that is talking about.
Well, nobody back then had been to Havana probably, but now you can.
Now you can.
Yeah,
That's right.
You can drive a 56 Chevy again.
That's right.
Yeah, that's all they got.
But they're in great shape for 57.
All right, Sheriff Bart eventually makes his way all the way over to the far wall, finds a big bucket of water sitting there, and manages to splash Mongo with it and yells,
Wake up time!
I got to go back to when you first saw the movie, if you can. When you were a kid or whenever you were, how funny was it to watch Mongo literally break his chains by just yawning?
Well, see, my family is still very much into sports. So the first time I saw it was, hey, Alex Karras, he played for the Lions.
So you knew right away that was Alex Karras.
I did, and I watched Webster too. So the show.
Yeah, but we asked this question a while ago. The way he looks in this movie and the way he looks in Webster, I would have never thought they were the same person.
I'm good at facial recognition, but in Webster he had the mustache.
Yeah, I know he had the mustache, but it just felt
the
like
Mike Ditka mustache.
It almost felt like he was more mature and older, and I couldn't see the same facial expressions of this young Mongo, especially when we go tight in. Maybe you did, because if you saw him a lot more than I did, I was like, oh, I knew the movie, and I knew Alex Karras played Mongo, and then he goes, well, he's also Webster's dad. I'm like, I don't see it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it was a pretty easy spot for me, but I grew up collecting football, baseball, and basketball cards, reading books, and I knew that was Alex Karras immediately, even when I was young.
All right, so you knew it was Alex Karras. What did you think about him yawning and breaking all of his chains? Like, they thought he was secure, and apparently not so much.
Yeah, I thought that was good because, there's the part, I'm sure, once again, you guys will cover where he knocks that donkey out cold with one punch.
Oh, yeah, that was earlier, yeah.
Yeah, so, that's just funny because he was known as, when he played football, he was a brutish guy. He was very aggressive. He's a lineman, and he had that reputation of being kind of nasty, even though he really, in real life.
Well, and he also had that one season off for getting caught gambling.
Yeah, he's got a little bit of a reputation as being a little bit of a character, and so I think they're just playing on that. And I think at that time when the movie was made, he was still a very well-known person, and Alex Karras being Mongo is perfectly casted.
Well, remember we said this probably like a week and a half or 2 weeks ago now in terms of episodes, several minutes back. We saw him chained outside of the jail, and we both said, why that? I mean, it's funny. Now the joke is paying off. Look how long it took. They set the joke up so far back of seeing him chained outside as if maybe that was more secure than the bars. It was all just for this joke.
Yeah. Well, and I think what they're trying to demonstrate is that Mongo is kind of a superhuman and that he's a larger.
Remember, he's more of a what?
He's more of a what?
A what? Yeah.
What?
It's not Mongo's not much of a him. He's more of a what?
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah. Or an it.
No, he says a what?
A what?
Yeah.
So, but also Alex Karras, I think every scene he's in, he's taller than everybody. He's bigger. He's just more imposing. And even the way that they're standing here with Sheriff Bart turned sideways, it's hard to get a good read on how big or small Alex Karras is. He's always put as larger than everybody else in this big imposing figure, which of course he is. But I remember when I saw this the first time and saw him chained up like that, I was like, he's coming out of those chains.
I laughed hysterically as a kid, like, oh my God, he broke all of his chains just by yawning. It's not even like stretching like the Hulk or something. Just oh my God, he could have walked out of there anytime.
It's kind of like Hancock, the movie. You're talking about Will Smith earlier.
Yeah.
Hancock, he could have just escaped prison anytime he felt like it, but he just stayed because it was the right thing to do for the public.
Yeah, had to stay.
Yeah.
So he tries to tell Mongo right off the bat, he goes,
Okay, Mongo, you're free to go.
There is a line in the script before he says this that was cut out. When he initially throws the bucket of water on a Mongo, Mongo takes his chains off and looks around and goes, "I'll have orange juice, toast, and coffee, and a paper, please." Like he had just been awoken from a hotel.
I'm glad they left that out.
Me too.
Yeah.
Where was that?
Right after, like the very first thing he says when he gets woken up from the splash of water, he yawns, breaks his chains, and says, "Orange juice, toast, and coffee, and a paper, please."
If he had said it in like a very like articulate voice, like out of character, that probably would have been funny. But if he did it in Mongo voice, it wouldn't have made much sense to me.
No,
Yeah.
I don't like it at all.
I'm glad they didn't.
Yeah.
Don't like it at all. But they obviously, I don't even think they filmed it. They may have the way they edited it because it comes right into, "Okay, Mongo, you're free to go," and then Mongo says,
Mongo no go.
So, what were your thoughts when watching this scene play out? Here's this guy that used to be in Taggart's camp, off to the wayside because he was a wild animal. He's been sent in to mutilate that sheriff and mash him into little meaty meatballs or whatever, little sheriff meatballs. Now, all of a sudden, the first thing he says is,
Mongo, stay with Sheriff Bart.
like, what's going through your head?
It's Stockholm syndrome. That's what it is. But yeah, you just get on with your captor until you're like, "Hey, look, I just need to be a part of this at this point." But yeah, I don't know. I like that part. I thought it was good because he had turned everybody they thrown at him against him. Lily Legs and now Mongo. He's stealing everybody from them, all their good weapons, and they just have their bumbling idiot people who work for him. He's not interested in stealing any of them.
What I really like about this is it's like he's saying, Sheriff Bart has slowly won him over. And if you remember, we talked about all the outtakes, the number of times, because the theatrical version only sees us beating Mongo once. Bart beats him at least 3 times, and there was a 4th one that they didn't even bother filming. So Mongo got his butt handed to him multiple times by a person. Does that ever, you're a sports guy, does that happen when all of a sudden you realize someone is that damn good?
Yeah.
They just earn your respect?
Yeah, it's kind of like how the Patriots, Alan, are doing in football.
Why?
Yeah, you walked. Yeah, you said, "Hey, you're a sports guy."
Yeah, but I was okay, fine. Like Rocky.
Okay, yeah. Like after a while, it's like, why bother fighting anymore? It's like, yeah, I don't want to lose unless they're going to pay me $5 million. Then I'll get into the ring again.
But I mean, this does happen in sports, doesn't it? Where you just realize someone is just that good, even though you've given them, your all, they beat you, and you're just like, you have to respect it.
Yeah, I mean, it's gotten that way. I mean, when it comes to a dynasty, I think that eventually people, all kidding aside, the Patriots are one of those. Alabama, you got to say that about them too. I mean, the point where there's a lot of people in the SEC and the people who play them regularly that are just like, oh man, every time. Darn,
I hate that we have to play them, but
this weekend.
They're good.
Yeah, they are. And I remember there was one year when Vanderbilt was doing better than normal. And one of their players, after a game, on their post game, said something like, "Yeah, we're rocking and rolling," or something lame like that, and said, "We're ready for Alabama, bring it on." And they were coming to Nashville the next week, and I was watching that interview, and I just shook my head. I was like, "Shh,
don't poke the bear.
Be quiet."
No. Well don't shoot him. That just makes him mad.
It was, I think and they saw that, and it was basically like half the Alabama team uploaded it on their Twitter.
You can't help moving your head.
I uploaded that on their Twitter, and we're like, "Hey, we'll see you in a week."
Yeah.
And I think it was 58-0 at halftime. So, there you go.
Maybe that's it. Maybe Alabama is the Mongo of the SEC, or of college football, and the Patriots are the Mongo of the NFL.
Yeah, no doubt. And the Warriors are the Mongo of the NBA.
They're not a who, they're more of a what.
Yeah.
They can't be beat,
No.
whatever it is.
Well,
and what's the old saying? You don't poke a sleeping bear.
yeah, don't poke the bear.
Yeah.
Don't wake the sleeping giant, don't poke the bear.
And in some ways, it would have been smarter here to not throw water on the sleeping Mongo.
I was actually wondering if that was going to make him mad, but instead he just yawns, stretches, and Bart doesn't seem nervous about it because apparently he's beaten him so many times, he's not worried about how to beat Mongo again. But there's a bit of a improv line here. He says,
Oh, come on, Mongo. You a free man.
well, what he was supposed to say was, "Hey, man, get out of here. You're free." I kind of like the more like the aw, like come on, man, it's okay. It's
very sympathetic.
I'm not going to come after you again. I don't think Mongo's worried about Sheriff Bart, but it's cool how Sheriff Bart's not even at all concerned that Mongo could rip his head off at this point.
Well, and I think for Mongo, he knows that he needs people. He would not survive well on his own. And he would, I think for him, the two choices are stay here or go back to Taggart and his camp. And we saw the way that he was treated by Taggart and his people. He was treated like a dog. He's chained up, thrown scraps, stuff like that. But with Sheriff Bart, he's treated with dignity and respect, and even though he's chained up and
I don't know. I'm not even sure. I mean, maybe at some point he feels that, but I do think it's the respect of being beaten by, and I think that's all Mongo understands is strength, and so he respects the next stronger opponent. I mean, and again, I keep going back to the fact that we had these outtakes. I wish they were in here because I love that Bart beats him 3 different ways, and every single time Mongo falls for the trap and loses to Sheriff Bart.
I think we said this before, but all the things that got left out of this movie, those are the things I wish that got left in, because I think there is something a little bit more to the televised version that has those outtakes in it that really let you know that he had to outwit him 3 times.
And I think, remember, Alex Karras, when he saw the final product, wasn't happy with the characterization of Mongo. And it very well could be that so much was taken out of his character and just left him as sort of just this bumbling simpleton beast, and that's it.
What was his problem?
He just thought that he didn't like the way his character was handled. It was just Burton Gilliam, who we had a chance to interview, the guy who plays Lyle, said that he and Alex Karras actually became roommates during the filming of this. So they hung out the whole time they were filming and had a good time filming, but said that when he went to see the theatrical release, he was like, he didn't like how his character was reflected on screen, that it just seemed kind of simplistic and basic. But I think because they filmed so much that was left out of the film.
Well, that's like, for me, not knowing about that, that's why I was like, that's the character, right? A simpleton that doesn't know anything but crushing people's heads and mashing them into Sheriff Meaty meatballs or whatever. That's all he knows.
Yeah, and I think his problem, from what Burton was saying, was that you didn't get enough of why he made the change from one side to the other, and that, he just, there were a lot of scenes shot that were really good, and that he did good work in that just got left on the floor.
I think that was it. It's probably more of the, hey, here's one of my, I think this is Alex Karras' first, it's very early on where he's realizing, I can make these little character roles in Hollywood. But I think it's one of those things where when you're a younger performer, I say younger in terms of your career, you're used to being the football star, getting all the highlights, to be sort of relegated to a secondary character, and then you saw all the stuff you filmed not in the final movie, that can sort of maybe that's where it was coming from. That's sort of, why'd we shoot all this stuff if we weren't going to use it?
Well, when you're a big guy like that, I mean, you have to, this is the 70s. There weren't many people of Alex Karras' size back then who are actors.
Mm-hmm.
You get kind of typecast in that. It's like, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, you get typecast, I mean, much to his benefit, as the gigantic hero that saves the day in every movie you are, because you're this giant weightlifting guy with, with a cool Austrian accent. So, that's what you're going to be.
I mean, let's face it, Arnold Schwarzenegger's first movie in the United States was called Hercules.
Yeah. I mean,
it wasn't even his voice.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, but you have these big guys like that. I mean, they want to cast them as the big dumb villain or whatever, and that's what you have. Like you watch the movie The Longest Yard, which is about the same era as this.
Oh yeah, mid-70s.
Yeah, you have like the biggest people in the movie who were on the football team were the dumbest Neanderthals on there. I mean, and that was it. And that's just that's what they wanted out of them, and that's what they thought they were.
Yeah, I don't know. It was hard to read into it what Burton was telling us because we didn't get a chance to ask Alex Karras directly. Can't do that. So
sadly,
no, we can't.
We get a Ouija board and let's try.
But it felt to me like it was sort of that. You didn't know the business of Hollywood, so you just assumed, well, I did well. I was told, great job, we love the takes, and then to go see the movie and go, well, where's all my scenes? Maybe that's what he felt slighted in that way, not necessarily about playing the big dumb oaf, but like, well, wait a minute, I should have a lot more screen time than I'm getting.
Yeah, and I mean, and if you knew anything about Alex Karras, in reality, he was not a dumb person whatsoever.
No, not at all.
And I think that may have offended him a little bit.
If I remember right, it's been a few weeks since we looked at him. I think he went to, he was at the University of Iowa, but he had a degree. I mean, he finished his college degree. He wasn't a dummy.
No.
And,
look, his character in Webster, I know obviously it's a character, but obviously able to handle a very well-spoken role.
Right,
a
stupid
role.
person can't even act like a smart person. I mean, you have to have some kind of intelligence to play.
I hate to
I
say it,
don't
but it's
know,
true.
man.
It's easier for a smart person to act dumb than a dumb person to act smart.
You ever
Yes.
watch some political debates?
Well, wait a minute.
Well, I never think
Beg to
they
differ.
act very smart.
No, wait a minute. Maybe we're not using the words correctly. Educated versus streetwise. Wait a minute.
Yeah. Well, no, there are some streetwise.
Well, you know what?
people who
Okay,
can
I'm going to
act.
use this. Maybe we do mean intelligent because I've always loved this analogy. What's the difference between intelligence and wisdom? Because people are like, well, what's the difference? Like, intelligence means you know that a tomato's a fruit. Like, you went to school and you learned, and someone taught you that a tomato actually qualifies as a fruit. Wisdom says it does not belong in a fruit salad.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Right.
Difference between intelligence and wisdom. The wisdom is how you apply the knowledge you have, not just the knowledge floating around in your head
Tomato
randomly.
in a fruit salad.
Oh,
That's like putting grapes in chicken salad. I never understood why people do that. That's horrific. But people do it all the time.
Well, how many times do you know somebody who you know made straight A's, and then they start talking about something, you're like, please don't say anything else.
Oh,
you'd be
yeah.
surprised.
Please don't.
This is ironic because this is happening right next door at the theater. They're doing it's not a pageant. It's a scholarship program called Distinguished Young Women. All these girls in there are straight A students, but I used to mentor. I did this a while ago. They did not know how to handle an interview where they would ask simple questions like, can you tell me who your representative is in your county? Can you tell me who represents you in the U.S. Senate? Can you tell me what the FBI stands for and what they do? They had a great amount of book knowledge, and they could do all the assignments. They passed all their tests, but there was like this missing component of practical real-world information. And so my job was just to come in and help, basically ask them a lot of these questions and get them to start thinking beyond the books that they were studying.
Oh, Alan, I have a friend of mine who is a doctor now, and he was one of those people, like straight A's, like a great test taker, just soaked in all the knowledge that he possibly could. But I had to tie his ties for him. Yeah, I had to tie his neckties for him. His car overheated one time, and I went down there because he had no idea what to do. And I mean, it was a pretty simple fix, but he had no clue how to fix any of that. This guy made an A in organic chemistry, and he barely made a C in political science. He can't. It just can't. His mind doesn't work that way. He's good at organic chemistry. I would make what's lower than an F? Like, I'd make a G. I'd make a G.
Right. I would
home.
stop showing up.
Yeah, I just wouldn't go. It's like, look, just give me an F and let me leave. Like that. But this guy, all the smarts in the world when it comes to books, but not a lick of common sense.
So this reminds me of back when I was in school. I majored in psychology, and I was on the science side, so I had to take a stat class. And so I'm sitting there, and I had one of these stat professors who just would turn his back to the kids the whole time, and it was chalkboard still. So we would, on the chalkboard, and he had one of those beer bellies that every time he turned around, his bottom half of his tie and his beer belly had chalk dust on it because he'd been rubbing up against the board. He loved what he was doing. You could tell, and he knew what he was talking about. He just had no way of really conveying the information. And if anybody who's listening doesn't know this, if you have a class that's part of your major, you can't get below a C usually, otherwise you're taking that class again. I had a 7D going into the final. Like, one point, I'm failing because I have a D, and I'll have to do it again. And he actually pulled me up to his desk after the day before the final, and he said, you've got a 70. I'm like, I know. He's like, you realize you need at least a 70 on the final to keep it at a 70. I'm like, yeah. He goes, well, what do you plan to do about it? I'm like, by the grace of God, I'm going to get a 70.
71.
Because I was struggling in that class, and I did. I managed to get like a 73 or 74. No matter how hard, I banged my head against the wall. I just couldn't figure out statistics. It's just one of those things. I was great in everything else that I took. Something about statistics, it just didn't stick.
Yeah, for me with math, it just ended up being a lot of boredom. I never understood they never could answer me this question, even in high school. I did not want to be a doctor or an engineer. I knew that. That's just not the way my mind works. It's not something that interests me at all. Nothing offense to people who do that for a living. It's just not for me. And my teachers, I would raise my hand and be like, why do I have to take calculus? I'm not interested in it. I don't want to take it. This is not the field I want to be in. They're like, it's part of the curriculum. I'm like, it's my life. And they were like, well, I mean, you have to take the curriculum. I'm like, says who?
Right.
They're like, the state of Georgia. I was like, they don't own me. Well, I mean,
Little did you know.
Yeah.
and now I'm a lawyer.
Now you're a lawyer.
now they do own you.
Yeah, they do.
Well, and I do get into this debate sometimes. I get when it's the upper level math. I actually had a debate with somebody just recently about, like, why do we even need algebra? When am I ever going to solve for X? I said, wait a minute. Have you ever cooked something? Like, what do you mean? Like, have you ever followed a recipe and the recipe says this makes 8, but now you want to cook for 16? How do you know how to do that? You're solving for X. You have to change the ratios of all the ingredients to double the recipe. Well, I just double it. I'm like, hey, welcome to algebra. You're solving for X.
No doubt.
You just know how to do it in your head because it was a simple form of algebra. But that's all you're doing is you're trying to figure out some other variable.
I think algebra should be the end point for most people. I mean, like, because honestly, I mean, trig, whatever. Calculus,
well, I'll be honest. If you get into construction, I liked geometry, and that really helped to understand angles and, when you're doing framing and stuff like that and learning where to cut. Because learning how to cut angles and make them match, you can do a whole lot of experimenting, or you can learn how to measure.
You know many times I've been in a criminal bond hearing and I've had to solve for X and use the isosceles triangle? I
don't think you have.
I can't even count them. How many times?
Because they don't exist.
Because they don't exist. That's right.
No, you may not solve for X, but you might sue somebody else's X, and that's a whole different story.
What a great segue. Yes, you're dang right. I would.
Yeah. Well, I was one of those great students as well that was always like, why do I have to take this class? And I remember getting into it with one of my teachers about using a calculator, and I was like, well, why can't I use a calculator on this? I mean, if I know the formula, that's really what we're trying to get, right? So why don't I have
the application of the formula?
And he goes, well, you're not going to carry a calculator around with you the rest of your life. I want to go back to him now and go, hello, my phone.
I don't even use this to talk anymore.
It isn't really a phone.
Hey, I mean, you know what? We can add and subtract things, and I can look up things on Urban Dictionary, so I'm good to go. Right. I don't need anything else.
That's all you need. It's almost like from The Jerk. As long as I have my this, as long as I have my that, it's like, as long as I have my iPhone, and as long as I have my...
Oh, when he's like, I don't need you as long as I can keep this. He's like walking down the sidewalk.
That's a wonderful, wonderful movie.
That is a great
You're talking
movie.
about Napa Valley earlier. I think about, I've been to Napa, and I remember I said this line to somebody, and they didn't understand what I meant by it. They gave me a nice vintage of wine, and I was like, don't give us that old wine. Give us the new wine.
I want something brand new. What's this vintage crap?
Yeah. I want that old wine. I want the new
bottle
wine.
of garbage. Trying to get rid of the old stuff. Well, you had asked him a minute ago about Alex Karras. He was in Paper Lion, which was
that's
a
right.
movie
Yeah,
about
we did talk
football.
about that because I made the point of saying it's ironic that Burton was in Paper Moon and Alex Karras was in Paper Lion.
That's right. Yep. So they had the paper movies. But even that, I mean, he was playing a football player, so it wasn't like he was really acting. And then he had 5 TV shows where he was on one episode each of 5 different shows, and then he was in Blazing Saddles. So he had been in the movie industry about 4 years before this, but
not
he didn't have
a
a ton
star,
of
certainly.
experience. No.
All right, well, let's get back to the wrap-up of sort of the last few seconds here, because just as Sheriff Bart says, it's okay, Mongo, you're free to go. You're a free man. There's a bit of I'm going to read the lines from the script. You can hear where Alex Karras probably improv'd a little bit or maybe just sent him his way.
Mongo stayed with Sheriff Bart. Sheriff first man ever whipped Mongo. Mongo impressed. Have deep feelings for Sheriff Bart.
Mm-hmm. And then Jim goes,
Oh, you better watch out, big fella. I think Mongo has taken a little fancy to you.
The twinkle in his eye. We always talk about Gene Wilder, that, like, how could you ever even be mad at him? When he delivers that line of like,
Apparently somebody's mad at him.
He's like, what do you mean?
Well, didn't you see that video I posted on the...
No, we're not going to talk about that. We're not going to talk... No, we're not talking about jilted exes sitting in wheelchairs just bitter at the end of their lives. You can figure out that by filling in your own blanks. No. The first time in the entire history of everything we've ever talked about, read about, or researched on Gene Wilder, and it turns out to be somebody who just was like...
jilted ex.
Yeah, well, we had a thing, and then he left me, and I'm in a wheelchair, and I hate him. He's the only person. But when he delivers that line, and when he says it with that little bit of a smile, and that's how I think Mongo misinterprets that taking a fancy to you.
Yeah, I think so.
which was a vernacular that no longer exists now. Taking
You never heard that? You don't hear that phrase, that take a fancy to?
I've heard it, but I mean, I said it's an old. Maybe for the time that it was, they've set this. It was, but I don't know about in the 70s.
It didn't have a gay connotation, did it? Take
Right.
a fancy to it?
No.
But I think it's the way he's delivering the line to Mongo,
with his
because he's
hand on his
smiling,
shoulder.
Yeah.
and he's putting his hand, and Bart's on this side, and Mongo's like, well, wait a minute.
Yeah. See, and that was not, that movement was not as alive and well as it is now. It was a lot more undercover. So, yeah, that's when the next line after this is kind of shocking.
Yeah. It definitely, for a 2019 audience, is a surprise line.
Yeah, no doubt, because you didn't hear it taught like that in a movie from the 70s. I mean, it was hush hush. I mean, I know there were some things.
Oh, well, this
mentioned
movie's got
about
it.
But this movie's got it. And that's the beauty of this movie. This movie crossed every line just that you possibly could back in the 70s, and came out on the other side as, like, for 95% of the world, like, this is hilarious. This is wonderful. And it's Mel Brooks. And if you knew Mel Brooks movies,
Right.
you know what he means by it.
The 5% of the people who were concerned about it were the executives at the movie studio.
Yeah.
And
they were
everybody
all
else
wrong.
was fine. Yeah, and they were totally wrong.
Well, I love Mongo's, he's sort of that just almost childlike,
Oh, Mongo straight.
and he like pushes his arms, like, to him it's like no big deal. Both Cleavon Little and Gene Wilder sell this so well.
Great.
Like, they go flying back into the bars of cells number 1 and 2. Like, and Mongo didn't even try.
And that's what almost belies Bart whooped him 4 times. How could you do that to a man that could do this? Knock you in, like that.
He outsmarted him.
Yeah, that's it.
Now, just as we're about to wrap up this minute, the Waco Kid suddenly starts to think, and he wants to ask Mongo a question. And we're not going to be able to get to it until tomorrow, but I just want to leave the audience with this. We're going to continue this scene. We're going to have Brad with us again tomorrow. It suddenly dawns on the Waco Kid, now, wait a minute, Mongo, I want to ask you a question. So we're going to have to figure out what that is tomorrow, but I love this. I love Gene Wilder, who's so in the moment, and yet it's totally believable that something just suddenly clicked in his head, like, oh, wait a second, I got a question. It's just, he's such a natural person on screen. He doesn't look like he's acting. It looks like we're just filming somebody.
Yeah, he really does. And it was interesting, the things that Burton said about him between scenes or cuts or takes. He would actually kind of go off by himself and just sort of think and mull over the thing. So it was almost like he had to stay in character the entire day of filming. But he does seem very natural and very, to me, he's Jim. He's the Waco Kid.
And it's also why he's one of our acting heroes.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, why do a podcast after him?
Of course. I mean, he reminds me of one. You have that one friend. I have a fraternity brother. It's just, he's like that. I mean, he could sell ice to Eskimos. He really could, and he could get out of anything, any jam, because of just the way he purports himself, and everybody just seems to like him no matter where you are. And just the way his delivery and the way he appears, people just are like, you know what, that guy's pretty cool. We're just gonna go along with whatever he says.
All right, as we begin to then bring episode 63, minute 63 of Blazing Saddles to a close, Brad, you are our guest. We're your hosts. So were there anything else in this minute that you wanted to chat about, anything in your notes to talk about?
Well, since this is my first minute on here, there's so many great minutes of this movie. The one part that I do laugh at, and you were talking about earlier, is just Mongo just breaking out of those chains, just like, all right, I'm out. I'm good to go now. Like, I'll go ahead and free myself. I always like that part because it's just irony.
It is.
And I love irony. I love that kind of humor. And that's a lot of things that you see in Mel Brooks films, all the way across. Spaceballs, every one of them, there's humor like that going on, like the part in Spaceballs where they have the combing the desert,
and they're actually giant combs.
Yeah, I mean that's the kind of stuff that's the kind of humor I enjoy, and that part right there is Mel Brooks. That's a signature right there.
All right, well, you got anything?
The only other thing I was going to say is with that same thing, when he breaks the chains, neither one of them react to it. They don't jump back, they don't go for their guns. It's just he breaks the chains, and they're like,
Well, it's like I said, it's like Bart has decided, I'm not really worried about you anymore.
Right, and you see that instant transition of the Mongo character, that he's now with the good guys.
Yeah, I like it. I don't have anything else in my notes either. So, Brad, you're going to be our guest coming back tomorrow. So hopefully you'll, do you need to get a continuance? You need to file that for any of your cases?
Yeah, I'll have an ex parte communication with the judge to make sure that we're going to be okay.
We only need about an hour. So if you can tell the judge, maybe take a longer break, maybe say we're going to dismiss court for a while, let the attorneys chat.
That's okay. I won't get in any kind of trouble with the bar for that.
Okay, good.
Your Honor, I've got to do a podcast on Blazing Saddles. That definitely is more important than
it's far more important than this case.
You'd be surprised if you say that, how many people go, oh, well, definitely go.
Can I come?
Absolutely. I've done that for a National Signing Day and the Rose Bowl.
Well, this is the South.
Yeah, it's like the dogs are about...
Judge, I'd like to move for a continuance. It's on National Signing Day. Oh, dear Lord, what are we doing in court today? Thanks for bringing that up, sir.
Why is the courthouse even open?
Court adjourned.
What dorks are here today to practice law? We're out of here.
All right. Well, before we tell you what's coming up tomorrow, Brad, I know for you don't have a podcast of your own, but you are an author, something I forgot to mention at the very beginning. People can read some of your tales of growing up in sort of small-town America in the South.
Yeah, that's right. It's called Reflections in Muddy Water. It's available on Amazon, also is available on Kindle and some local bookstores here in Cartersville. It's basically just a bunch of short stories about where I grew up here in Bartow County and the store my family owned for many years, and working up there pumping gas and hauling feed and all the characters that used to hang around and drink coffee and tell lies on the front steps. So it's a really quick read, but a lot of people have enjoyed it. It's like 99% humor. 1% serious, but it's 100% true.
That's the funny part.
Yeah, and the only thing I did was change people's names.
The wife and I are pleased to have had one of your first autographed copies, and it is very, very funny. Brad is a very funny, satirical, wry person. You'd fall in the Mel Brooks camp.
I would. I mean, if I could be cast in a Mel Brooks flick, I think I would do okay. It would not.
You'd be fine. You'd be like, I'm home.
I'll just be me and be fine. Yeah, we're good to go.
All right. Do you do anything on social media if anybody wants to follow you? I know you do some satirical writing on social media as well.
Yeah, on Facebook some. I'm not really on Twitter. I've not joined this century yet on that. I just, I don't know. I take breaks from social media, then I get back on. I take another break, because, for me, I try to stay. People get so negative and so political on there, I just get tired of reading it. But I try to provide levity, so whenever I do feel that way, I'll post something every now and then.
Excellent. Walt, where can people learn a little bit more about The Wilder Ride?
Well, speaking of social media, why don't you go over to facebook.com/The Wilder Ride. From there, click the button and join our listeners group. That's going to be the best way to find out everything about us. And from there, you can also find our website. You can get involved in some of the discussion on there. And at our website at thewilderride.com, you can find bios on all of our guests. You can find our past episodes and all the other fun stuff.
And come back tomorrow, Thursday, episode 64 for Minute 64, where we'll start off with maybe why's a high roller like Hedley Lamarr, and we're going to end with railroad scenery and the theme playing in the background. Is the movie over? Where are we going? What's happening? And why the railroad? We haven't been there in a while. So come on back tomorrow for more of this, The Wilder Ride.
Mongo straight.
Mongo very straight. Mongo no take. Mongo pile.
So are you just trying to edit stuff out, or
yes? Try to keep Mongo like work.
Trying to find enemies for our podcast.
You're a free man, Mongo. 1 minute at a time. No. Try that again.
That's right.
It was 30 minutes into this movie before he shows up. Yep. But Brad, I don't know if you heard this story, but eventually it'll come back around when we do get to Willy Wonka, since we're waiting on the train. The director really wanted him, and Gene read the script and he went through it and he thought, okay, I've got one thing, and I want to make sure that if I do this, I want to change the opening scene when we first meet Willy Wonka. He goes, what do you mean? He said, I want to come out as frail and maybe bitter. I want to come across as just the exact opposite of this cheery, maker of dreams. I want to come out with a cane, and I want to come down the sidewalk, and as I get close to the crowd, I want to put my cane, and he said this to the director, I want to put my cane in the ground, and it sticks, and I go to take another step and realize my cane's not there, and then I suddenly panic and fall forward, but then just as I'm about to hit, I do a somersault roll, pop up, and go, ta-da! He goes, why the hell would you want to do that? He said, because from this point forward, the audience is never going to know if I'm lying to them. Like, he thought of that. He said, this is how I want to come across with my character, so that you never know, am I just joking, or am I really being for real? Am I lying, or am I telling you the truth? And it sets the tone for the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
Whoops, I had my microphone off this whole time. I have to redo the whole thing.
Nice work, Alan.
Well, I had turned it off because of the train, and then I turned it back. Okay, so